Welcome back, viewers and listeners, to yet another episode from our special season on the 1980s horror, that is. And we have an 80s slash for you today. But first, as always, we'll do our quick cuts. Should I mix it up? I'll go first this time? Or?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go first.
Let's keep the audience on their toes.
So if you're a regular listener or a viewer, then my quick cut today should sound familiar, as this is Heart Eyes from 2025, which was your quick cut last week?
Yeah, last episode.
Yes. So Heart Eyes from 2025 is a romantic comedy slasher film directed by Josh Rubin. The story follows Allie McCabe, Olivia Holt, and Jay Simmons, Mason Gooding, two Seattle advertising executives who are mistaken for a couple by the infamous Heart Eyes killer. As they fight to survive the killer's Valentine's Day rampage, genuine romantic feelings begin to develop between them. And this had a 81% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 77% audience score. I seem to recall that you had a positive impression of this one, and I would corroborate your feelings. I actually think this just is like the perfect tone for a slasher film.
Yeah, I thought they nailed it.
Because they usually calibrate between sometimes too much comedy or not enough comedy, or too goofy or not too goofy. And this one just is like kind of the perfect level of self-awareness and levity, but then also like intensity and gore. And I actually do kind of like it's formulated like a rom-com.
Yes, but with horror.
But with a slasher. Yeah. And you don't see rom-coms too often. There was it Meat? Maybe one.
I didn't see that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That one was sort of,
like MEAT or MEET?
I think MEAT.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Do you know that one?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
So that was really good. And it's formatted a bit like a rom-com. And so I like the rom-com formula. Actually, I don't like rom-coms.
No, not well.
But rom-coms that are slasher films, I can get behind those.
There you go.
So this was a pleasant surprise. I would not be surprised if they maybe start trying to franchise this one potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I always hesitate about franchising because I think it diminishes the original, unless the original is lousy, and then maybe fine. But yeah, I mean, they could do a good job. Certainly, there have been movies where, sequels were equal to or better than the original, but it's not common.
But this one's just really fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's still got that
it's got some
heart
gruesome
and intensity and some gruesome moments. Yeah. So I just really enjoyed this one. It was good. So good pick last week. Thank you. I second that. So I highly recommend Heart Eyes from 2025.
Awesome.
And your quick cut?
Well, my quick cut is also a 2025, and it might be 2024. It's Daddy's Head.
2024.
2024. It's a folk horror, 92 minutes, 5.6 on IMDb, and 85 and 53, respectively.
And I had done this as my quick cut a few episodes ago. Yeah. So I'm curious to hear what you thought of it.
So, okay. The movies, so Benjamin Barfoot's the director. James Harper Jones was one of the cast. Rupert Turnbull and Julia Brown. A boy and his stepmother fear for their safety after an eerie creature resembling the boy's recently deceased father visits them. This didn't really do it for me.
Now, do you think you went in with high expectations because I had recommended it and it had some good reviews?
Maybe. I mean, as often is the case, my expectations might have been the problem. But so the movie's well done. And there's some really interesting things that they do. And I like the folk horror feel. Just something about it didn't work for me.
That's fair. I would say it's not the most accessible horror film. Some people might really like it because I do think it's well done, but I wouldn't blame someone for not enjoying it.
Yeah. And so I'm not taking away from the fact that it's probably worth seeing. And it's good production value, good performances. But for some reason, it just didn't really grab me. And I'm not sure why. I'd have to see it again to maybe nail down why.
I remember I struggled a little bit with I didn't really like any of the characters.
Yeah, like the little boy I found hard to like.
Yeah, like he's your protagonist, but he's not not very likable. And then the stepmother,
right?
is fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've nailed it, though, partly because I think in order for the horror to have impact, you have to care about the protagonist. And I don't know that I cared about this I felt sorry for him that his dad died, but I just didn't really care about him as a character.
No, I agree, and I could feel that. I liked kind of the atmosphere and the tone, and it has that kind of like European colder aesthetic or something to it.
Yeah, that and as a folk horror, I think it works. I mean, there's lots.
And you typically like those.
I do.
Feel like, yeah.
I do. And like I said, I mean, I might reevaluate on a second watch. It was good, and I wouldn't say it was a hard watch. It's just it wasn't something I'd go, oh yeah, that was awesome. But,
no, I agree.
Yeah. But it might grow on me.
Did you find it scary at all, or?
There were a couple of moments, but overall, it was just kind of an uncomfortable tone as opposed to scary.
Yeah. It's not an outright recommend, you know? It's,
yeah. I agree.
For the right person in the right mood, I think it could hit.
Yeah.
But it also, for the wrong person or not in the right mood, it also could miss.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's a harder one to recommend. Okay, cool.
There you go.
That's interesting that we both chose quick cuts that the other one had done in a previous episode.
Yeah, it's funny because until you just said it, I was like, oh yeah, you did this one. Because I couldn't remember if you just recommended it or if you had used it on the pod. So there you go.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad you checked it out anyways. Curious to hear.
Yeah, it was worth seeing for sure.
All right, so our main event for today is My Bloody Valentine from 1981.
It's a bad time, this time of year. How many times is he going to tell this story?
Oh, let him tell it. I love fairy tales.
This ain't no fairy tale, little girl. If you don't take it seriously, you're a fool!
Which is a Canadian slasher film
Indeed
directed by
it is.
George Mahalka.
That's how I got it, Mahalka, yeah.
Okay. The story unfolds in a small mining town of Valentine Bluffs, where a tragic accident in the mines leads to a gruesome legend. Years later, as townsfolk plan a Valentine's Day dance, a masked killer, donning mining gear, begins a terrifying spree, seemingly bringing the legend to life.
Dun, dun, dun.
For the main cast, we have Paul Kellerman as TJ, Laurie Hallier as Sarah, and Neil Affleck as Axel Palmer. No relation to Ben Affleck.
I had that in my notes. Like, is this a relation?
I feel like the timelines went
Yeah,
quite, unless it's
yeah.
like his uncle or something. And Ben Affleck is not Canadian.
No.
No.
They're from, but I wondered whether the whole cast was Canadian or, because I mean, they're from Boston, right?
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
So they could have just come up over the border because this is filmed on the East Coast. It's Nova Scotia.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be impossible that he would have come across the border from Maine into Nova Scotia.
Yeah, good point. I'll have to look that up after. Ratings. So this got a 6.2 on Internet Movie Database and a 58% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 52% audience score. So pretty similar, kind of lukewarm.
Yeah.
Although I did find in my research of this film that this is Quentin Tarantino's all-time favorite slasher film.
Yeah, that was fascinating to me.
Which is cool. And as Canadians, I feel like this film did have some Canadian charm.
There's definitely some Canadian in there.
Now, again, since you were around in the 80s, I'd love to know your background on this film and if you'd seen it before and what your initial impression was of it.
I have seen this before, but I did not see it in theaters because I would have been 15 when this came out. And I think it would have been, restricted, although I read somewhere or saw an interview that in order to get theatrical release, they cut 9 minutes out of this, like some pretty gruesome scenes. And then with the re-release later, they added 3 minutes back in. So I didn't see this upon initial release. I have seen it a few times, on home video or whatever. I did see the remake in 2009.
Yes. Because 2009 is when they re-released the cut footage.
I think
was my
so.
understanding.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that it would correlate with the release of the remake. Okay.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I wasn't that jazzed about this when I saw it originally.
Yeah.
It was like, okay. I like it more probably now than I did back in the day.
That's interesting. I would say I also liked this more than I was expecting to.
Yeah, it's got some, I think, well, we can talk about some of the elements, but I mean, it was interesting and not surprising to me that Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs down.
Yeah.
They weren't big horror movie fans.
No, you almost can't take that with much credit just
No.
because horror films get pretty unfair shake with mainstream critics.
Yeah, I think they were a bit snobbish in general. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from their ability to critique, but I think they had a bit of a hate on for for the genre.
So I have not seen this before I watched it for this episode. I have seen the remake, but it was pretty forgettable at the time. Like, I don't really remember it. I remember just thinking it was whatever. I don't remember having a strong opinion one way or the other. Do you remember what you thought of the remake?
I think on the same is like forgettable.
Yeah. Because my understanding I seem to recall at the time that people thought that maybe the original was better. This actually would have been a very good candidate for a versus episode, the original versus remake. That would have been fun.
I think the remake doesn't have the charm of the original. Yeah. It's just, like a forgettable slasher. Whereas I think this one has some elements of not just the time period, but there's just something, and I don't mean this nostalgic for me, but there's something nostalgic about the time and its small town, and it's like I recognize those kind of small town Canadiana kind of things.
Yes.
So for me, that makes it a more interesting watch than the remake, which I found to be a little bit sterile and sort of Hollywood.
Yeah, and it's been interesting this season doing the 1980s, but we've had some of these kind of on the shoulder between the 1970s and the 1980s. And I find myself enjoying the ones that are like closer to the beginning of the decade. Yeah. Because to me, again, this feels maybe a little bit more like a 70s film than an 80s film.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And for that reason, I think I liked it better.
Because I think you're right. Like the ones closer, it seems to me what happened is from the 70s to the 80s, that turn in decade, there was still a bit of a tinge of 70s. And as it got more into the middle of the decade, it got a little bit more
where it's unmistakably 80s.
Yes. You got the neon and it just got 80s bloat to it. Whereas I think this one, I mean, it's decent production value, but it's not a high budget film by any stretch. No. So it's got that little bit of graininess to it, and it's got a little bit, it's rough around the edges.
And if I had zero context and someone said to me, watch this film and predict whether this was from the 70s or the 80s,
you would have said,
I feel like I might have guessed 70s, where some of the ones we've watched, like Return of the Living Dead or something, it's just, this is clearly 1980s.
But that was 85, right?
I don't remember the year. I think it was kind of mid,
85, 86, something like that. So I agree 100%. Now I've often jumped in with music.
Yes.
So what was did anything stand out for you, or did you recognize anything, or?
Yeah, I liked, it had kind of that Eastern folky, borderline Celtic kind of tones to it. There's the one scene where the two guys are having like their harmonica scene,
which was ridiculous,
which was cheesy, but it does give it that little bit of culture. And then there's one scene where it's almost like Mumford and Sons, almost like banjo-y, like
I've got hillbilly banjo.
Hillbilly banjo, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. So I don't know, like that's not necessarily my jam in terms of music, but I find that grounds it and gives it more of a sense of place and time. And it's probably preferable to just the random synth 80s stuff, which is pretty generic and overused. So I can see how some people might not like that music, and there's like a folk song at the end too.
There's like the ballad of whoever it was.
Yeah. So I actually kind of like the music from that regard, but I don't know. What did you think?
Well, I think I think you're right. I think it fits kind of the place of the film. I mean, I found it to be a little bit inconsistent in the sense of like you've got this folk ballad, but then you've got the hillbilly banjo. Yeah. There were some cheesy string, pads. Yeah. And there was I didn't know where it happened, but there was some kind of musical thing that reminded me kind of like the Dukes of Hazzard sort of thing. And it was kind of like a caper thing. And I'm like, it was all over the map tonally for me musically, but I don't think the music strayed too far from the feel of the film. I think it approached the feel of the film, so I can't fault it on that. And it wasn't my favorite, but I'd rather have this than cheesy synth.
Yeah, like I didn't run straight to my iPad and download the soundtrack or anything on Spotify to listen to.
Fair, but
I think the thing that keeps coming up for me this film is it kind of felt refreshing or unique.
Yes.
And I think the music speaks to that. Yeah. Like just the setting, like taking place in a mine, like that is not a summer camp and it's not a babysitter's house. So I think the music, though quirky and a bit inconsistent, which I think makes sense, it did feel kind of refreshing and unique. And I find that comes up in a few different elements of this film. And I think that's why I liked it, because this strays from some of your formulaic slasher tropes.
Yeah.
And I think the music kind of is consistent with that.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I agree with you. It's this is a unique film. I've got that in my notes too. It's like that's part of the reason that it has charm for me, because it doesn't use kind of the cliche tropes, even of the time. I mean, even 1981, there already would have been Friday the 13th, the original. I think Sleepaway Camp was 1981 or was it 82? So the concept had been around, you know, for a while, but this was just interesting because although they chose a small town idea, they chose a completely different take on that. And I quite like that.
Yeah. So I was expecting something a little more generic, and I think maybe was pleasantly surprised by kind of how fresh it felt.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious to go back and see the 2009 remake to see if they maintain any of those elements or if it just falls into more of like your typical slasher, which exactly. I feel like maybe it did.
Yeah. And that's why I say, I think if we both felt that the remake was forgettable, it was probably for a reason, probably because it was forgettable.
For sure.
So I have, I mean, some of the 80s things that stood out for me, the makeup, number one, especially these early 80s, like I was in high school in 1981. So I remember like the blue eyeshadow and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you caught this, but I remember this from the 70s. I saw they had Moosehead beer and they had the stubby beer bottles.
Okay, yeah.
Which changed, I think, in the 80s. So for those of you who are too young to remember, they used to have these like stubby fat beer bottles. And they were just kind of iconic, I think, of a time. And then they switched over to that long neck bottle like later in the 80s. But I thought there were a couple of things that I found really interesting too. First of all, I was quite happy that the tubby guy had a girlfriend. I thought that was like, woohoo.
That's true. Yeah.
He's not the outsider. He's just a guy, like a normal guy. So I
did not note that, but that's a nice point.
Yeah. Okay. I like the hearts in the box of chocolates.
Yeah.
Those are pretty good. And it's like, but yeah, that's just, it was funny to me because it's like, life's like a box of chocolates. What else did I want to say? Oh, I thought the breathing in the mask was kind of like Michael Myers.
Totally. And they have some of those like POV shots, which is very reminiscent of Michael Myers with the breathing.
Yeah, totally.
No, I think it works with the mining mask. Like it makes sense that it would make that sound. But yeah, that part felt like maybe tribute rather than copycat, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I didn't feel that it was copying because it was such a different context. It's not a Halloween mask. So that's, I think, part of the uniqueness of this film is that those props had purpose in the sense that, the miners would wear those things. It wasn't like somebody grabbed one off a shelf and they were using it to hide themselves. I like the lore of the film.
Definitely.
Which I think adds a depth that you don't often get in some of these lower budget films. It's kind of like an afterthought, but I think this was kind of thought through in terms of, and there's a good surprise later on, a good twist.
Yeah, and it seems like holiday horror is a bit of a thing. You've got we have Thanksgiving and Black Christmas, and there isn't a whole lot for Valentine's Day, although ironically, Hard Eyes is a Valentine. So that actually worked out very nicely. I didn't pair those two intentionally. But yeah, some Valentine's Day horror I think works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's what was I going to say? There's been, like you say, the Christmas ones, Thanksgiving, this one, there's been, I was just trying to think. There's been a bunch of birthday ones, like Happy Birthday to Me, and what is it? Happy Death Day.
Happy Death Day. Yeah, that was really good. And actually, Valentine's Day works with a slasher more than other holidays because it's all about being a couple and romance, and that's such a trapping of slasher films that actually works really well.
Yeah,
whereas Christmas is maybe a trickier fit. But it's all about teenagers getting together. Actually, in this case, they felt more like because they're working adults.
Yeah.
And maybe that was kind of refreshing too. I actually found the characters all very grounded and authentic, a bit too innocent maybe, but But unlike a lot of slasher films where it's just like, let's just find a place to go hook up. And that's the depth of the characters, like the love triangle thing I thought kind of worked. They seem to have genuine friendship and like how the coworkers go out together, and then you've got the whodunit mystery element. Like there was more to this than just we're just going to line up a bunch of teens to kill. Like they actually did put some effort into the love triangle thing.
Yeah.
And I actually felt like some of the performances, like I wasn't heavily invested in it, but for a slasher film, I actually feel like that storyline subplot and some of the other ones as well made this a little more rich and deep than just, hey, let's go find a place to hook up in a cabin and then someone's going to come kill us.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think the performances, there was nothing standout for me, but they were solid for the most part.
It could have been a lot worse, I felt like.
It could have been a lot worse.
Like the scene where he like takes her out to the cliffs.
Yes, that was a bit cheesy. But
it was cheesy, but I feel like they kind of pulled it off.
Yeah.
More than I would have expected. Maybe my expectations were so low, but I was like, oh, that was actually, I can believe that you guys are in love, and that love triangle thing felt kind of realistic.
It did to me, because I think having lived in a couple of small towns as an adult, maybe not this small, but approaching this small, that I witnessed those kinds of things happening, where somebody would go away for work or something like that, or school, and then you kind of lose your romantic connection, and there's somebody else who's just happens to be there. So, or maybe they had a past and now they hook up again. So I felt that was pretty realistic in terms of life.
And I've been in that situation where you and a friend are wanting the same person and you're still trying to maintain your friendship and work it out, but it's obviously tense and awkward.
Yeah.
So I feel like they actually captured that pretty well, more than I would have expected for just a slasher film.
Now, did you recognize any of the actors?
I don't think I did.
Because there's Cynthia Dale.
Okay.
She was on I think Law and Order.
Okay.
Is what she was in. But what was interesting to me is because I think the Canadian productions were relatively small in the 70s. And I think they had a contingency of actors that kind of worked on multiple, projects, and there were faces. So like, for example, I can't remember her character's name, but the one in the laundromat, the older lady or middle-aged lady. Is it
Maeve, or it starts with an A. It's not that, but it's something like that.
So anyway, that was a face that I recognized. Several of the younger actors I recognized from later parts.
The TJ guy, maybe I recognized from something, but
yeah, I think that's one of the ones I'm thinking of. Was he the kind of curly haired? Yeah. So anyway, I think if you're of a certain, but yeah, that's just, it was funny to me because it's like, life's like a box of chocolates. What else did I want to say? Oh, I thought the breathing in the mask was kind of like Michael Myers.
Totally. And they have some of those like POV shots, which is very reminiscent of Michael Myers with the breathing.
Yeah, totally.
Now, I think it works with the mining mask. Like it makes sense that it would make that sound. But that part felt like maybe tribute rather than copycat, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I didn't feel that it was copying because it was such a different context. It's not a Halloween mask. So that's, I think, part of the uniqueness of this film is that those props had purpose in the sense that, the miners would wear those things. It wasn't like somebody grabbed one off a shelf and they were using it to hide themselves. I like the lore of the film.
Definitely.
Which I think adds a depth that you don't often get in some of these lower budget films. It's kind of like an afterthought, but I think this was kind of thought through in terms of, and there's a good surprise later on, a good twist.
Yeah, and it seems like holiday horror is a bit of a thing. You've got we have Thanksgiving and Black Christmas, and there isn't a whole lot for Valentine's Day, although ironically, Hard Eyes is a Valentine. So that actually worked out very nicely. I didn't pair those two intentionally. But yeah, some Valentine's Day horror I think works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's what was I going to say? There's been, like you say, the Christmas ones, Thanksgiving. This one, there's been, I was just trying to think. There's been a bunch of birthday ones, like Happy Birthday to Me, and what is it? Happy Death Day.
Happy Death Day. Yeah, that was really good. And actually, Valentine's Day works with a slasher more than other holidays because it's all about being a couple and romance, and that's such a trapping of slasher films that actually works really well.
Yeah,
whereas Christmas is maybe a trickier fit, but it's all about teenagers getting together. Actually, in this case, they felt more like because they're working adults.
Yeah.
And maybe that was kind of refreshing too. I actually found the characters all very grounded and authentic, a bit too innocent maybe, but
yeah.
But unlike a lot of slasher films where it's just like let's just find a place to go hook up.
Yeah.
And that's the depth of the characters. Like the love triangle thing, I thought kind of worked. They seem to have genuine friendship and like how the coworkers go out together. And then you've got the whodunit mystery element. Like there was more to this than just, we're just going to line up a bunch of teens to kill. Like they actually did put some effort into the love triangle thing.
Yeah.
And I actually felt like some of the performances, like I wasn't heavily invested in it, but for a slasher film, I actually feel like that storyline subplot and some of the other ones as well made this a little more rich and deep than just, hey, let's go find a place to hook up in a cabin and then someone's going to kill us.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think the performances, there was nothing standout for me, but they were solid for the most part.
It could have been a lot worse, I felt
like. It could have been a lot worse.
Like the scene where he like takes her out to the cliffs.
Yes, that was a bit cheesy. But
it was cheesy, but I feel like they kind of pulled it off.
Yeah.
More than I would have expected. Maybe my expectations were so low, but I was like, oh, that was actually, I can believe that you guys are in love and that love triangle thing felt kind of realistic.
It did to me because I think having lived in a couple of small towns as an adult, maybe not this small, but approaching this small, that I witnessed those kinds of things happening where somebody would go away for work or something like that, or school, and then you kind of lose your romantic connection and there's somebody else who's just happens to be there. So, or maybe they had a past and now they hook up again. So I felt that was pretty realistic in terms of life.
And I've been in that situation where you and a friend are wanting the same person and you're still trying to maintain your friendship and work it out, but it's obviously tense and awkward. Yeah. So I feel like they actually captured that pretty well, more than I would have expected for just a slasher film.
Now, did you recognize any of the actors?
I don't think I did.
Because there's Cynthia Dale.
Okay.
She was on not I think Law and Order.
Okay.
Is what she was in. But what was interesting to me is because I think the Canadian productions were relatively small in the 70s. And I think they had a contingency of actors that kind of worked on multiple, projects, and there were faces. So like, for example, I can't remember her character's name, but the one in the laundromat, the older lady or middle-aged lady. Is it May?
Maeve, or it starts with an A. It's not that, but it's something like that.
So anyway, that was a face that I recognized. Several of the younger actors I recognized from later parts.
The TJ guy, maybe I recognized from something, but
yeah, I think that's one of the ones I'm thinking of. Was he the kind of curly haired? Yeah. So anyway, I think if you're of a certain age, in other words, if you're old like me, you will recognize, and you're Canadian. I saw a lot of those faces on Canadian TV.
Yeah, see, in the 80s, I was watching mostly like kids' cartoons and Mr. Dress Up and Sesame Street, so I probably wouldn't have been exposed to many of those people.
Exactly.
But there's no big name actors.
No, I mean, Cynthia Dale probably would be the biggest that like following her career. I think a lot of at least judging by age, some of the younger actors probably would have had careers in TV or movies in Canada, but I don't know that anyone broke big.
I think I heard the sheriff guy was maybe the voice of Boba Fett in the Star Wars Christmas special or something. I mean, it's still
there you go.
Pretty obscure, but
Mabel. That was Mabel.
Yes, that's it. Good one. Yeah, and I think the best aspect of this film was the practical effects.
Yeah.
Were pretty unreal.
Yeah.
Do you think, I guess the nature of the kills would be spoilers? Should we save that for afterwards?
Yeah, I think so. Cause I think there's a couple of ones that I want to mention. But yeah, I think it would be giving something away if we,
okay.
I mean, you can see it coming from a mile away in the film, but I think it'd be good to hang off on that.
But I was impressed. I mean, I think those are some of the better practical effects for a slasher film from this time period that I can think of.
Especially because it wasn't, I guess I was going to say because it wasn't a big budget, but other than those studio films back in the 70s, like The Exorcist or The Omen, slashers often didn't have until much later a big budget. So they were always kind of small. They had to cut corners. And
now I think about it, it's interesting that you said that at the time, this one maybe didn't do as much for you, but on rewatch, it was better. But if you had ended up seeing the censored version of this from the time, it would lose a lot of its oomph, I think, because for me, the practical effects of the kills was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have that, I think it would lose a lot of the gravity. So it's interesting you say that, because I don't know. I think I would have liked the film less, or I'd feel less favorable about it overall if those censorship had maintained and those scenes were taken out of the film.
Yeah,
like 9 minutes is a lot.
It's a lot
to cut out,
especially if they're like there are maybe minute or minute and a half scenes that are like gruesome. And I can only speculate that I wouldn't have seen an uncut. It would have to have been a cut.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So that's interesting that you didn't like it as much, and I can see that. And apparently some of the more like extreme kills are still not even in the 2009 version. Yeah. Like, was it Mike and Harriet or something? Two of the, I guess, again, I'll have to mention that. Yeah. Spoiler, I suppose. One bit of trivia I thought was pretty funny, very Canadian. So when they found out this film was going to be happening, the townsfolk went through and cleaned up the mine. They spent $50,000 like making it, restoring it and then they got there and they were like, oh, we actually wanted it to be like cringy, like, grungy and look like an authentic mine. So then they had to spend, was it $75,000 to make it, making it dirty again, which is pretty funny.
That's awesome.
They thought they were doing them a favor by making the mine look nice. And then, that's not what they wanted, of course. So I thought that was
super interesting.
Funny. Yeah.
Well, what did you have? Like, were there any major niggles for you? Any big dislikes?
There actually wasn't really. I think if I'd seen the censored version of it, it wouldn't have been as good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, actually, I did have one. The Howard character, who's just kind of this goofy, immature loser. Right. Like, a lot of the teenagers were very innocent, like maybe too innocent. But he almost just seemed goofy when he's like snorting cola up his nose and like making stupid faces. Like, I thought he just was distracting. So I didn't like him very much. And I just feel like the innocence of the characters and just kind of the wholesome nature of it might turn some people off. Yeah. And for me, it just kind of worked just because I think it felt kind of refreshing compared to a lot of the other slashers from this time period. But I actually didn't have too many. I actually liked this a lot more than I was expecting to. Granted, I think I had very low expectations, but everything kind of worked for me. But I'd be curious to hear if you had cons.
I didn't have any major ones. I had 3 sort of minor ones. We already talked about the harmonica duet in the junkyard. I'm just like, come on. And I'm not sure if they realize that tires don't squeal on gravel. So the sound person might have wanted to figure that out.
That came up in The Howling as well. Where a guy comes in on grass.
Yes.
The tires are squealing. Like, wait a minute, that makes no sense.
It's like, couldn't the Foley artist have gone and like actually done something else? But maybe, tires on grass doesn't really have a sound. No. So, and the third thing was, the bartender exposition dump didn't really work. I mean, it is what it is. Like, they had to give you the backstory, and so that's how they chose to do it. But it was like, couldn't you have come up with a better way to do that?
No, that's fair. I mean, your other 2 points are very minor. I couldn't imagine the harmonica battle was a huge turn off.
It wasn't. And it was pretty short. But
it wasn't a battle, but
it was funny. I mean, it was negative in a funny sense. It was like, really, these 2 rivals for the heart of this young woman are going to be having a harmonica duet in a junkyard.
Yeah, I feel like this film walks a very fine line between like cheese and charm, and depending on what mood you're in or what your expectations are. Like, I wouldn't fault anyone for thinking like this was really cheesy.
Yeah, that's a really accurate, I think, way of it. Of describing how it walks the line. Yeah, that's totally accurate.
So for me, maybe I was in a generous mood, but it landed for me slightly more charming, but I could totally see, I mean, the critic and audience scores pretty lukewarm. Yeah. So what do you think of the coal mine setting and the miner look for the killer?
That works really well for me. Like, I think the mine being a unique setting really sets you up for some interesting kills and just some interesting, and this is, I think, thoughtful on the filmmaker's part, because if you're in a mine, there's going to be dark places, there's going to be shadows, so all that lighting kind of works for you. And if you've got a flashlight or a headlamp or whatever, you can have reveals when people turn or, move their flashlight. So I think it's smart. It was a smart idea to set the story, part of the story in the mine, and that's the lore behind the kills. So I mean, I think that really worked for me, and the mining outfit is awesome.
Yeah, I thought the lore and the backstory and like it worked for me. Yeah, again, maybe for some people it would be too cheesy, but if you have the obstacle of having to make a fairly authentic horror slasher film around Valentine's Day, like that's already kind of tricky to do. But I feel like they kind of pulled it off given the restrictions of having to work within those confines. So yeah, I mean, I just was pretty pleasantly surprised all around. Now, I know there's an element of the ending that people complain about, which I don't think I will. But again, that's something I think we'll have to discuss in the spoiler section. Yeah. So no, I didn't really have any niggles. And I liked the setting. I liked the killer. I liked the grounded nature of the characters. The love triangle thing kind of worked for me. And the whodunit kind of thing worked for me, like the investigation of the sheriff guy. Yeah. And just the fact that like it kind of felt like a real organic town. Like it felt like there was relationships between the adults and the kids, and the father's son had left and came back, and like it had that small town feel to it. I've not been to Nova Scotia. Have you been to Nova Scotia?
No, PEI, but not Nova Scotia.
Yeah, me too. Okay. So I can't speak to what it felt, but it had some Eastern Canadian flavor to it.
I feel like the feel of the film was genuine. It was authentic. It felt like that was a small town. It felt like those people were real and interacted with one another.
Yeah. So if you had to choose between like Friday the 13th Part 4 or Nightmare on Elm Street 6, like this is, if you're looking for a slasher film, I would recommend this one.
Yeah, I think so too. Because of, the things like, because the performances are decent, the storyline's good, some of the kills are good. I would say, instead of watching the 8th part of a franchise, try to choose something different. And the fact that this has a very unique setting, I think makes it more interesting than a lot of the other options.
It's down a tier from Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street or the first Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
But it's better than a lot of 80s slashers, I feel like. So you could do a lot worse for 1980s slashers than My Bloody Valentine, in my opinion. So I'd recommend it.
So that's 2 recommends.
2 recommends for My Bloody Valentine.
There you go.
And I wasn't coming into this necessarily expecting that to be the case. I am curious to go watch the 2009 remake now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased. I'm pleasantly surprised that you enjoyed this one because I wasn't sure how it would come off for you. And of course,
we're biased because we're Canadians, so maybe we're.
I was going to say maybe we're just being generous because it was a Canadian film. But
Tarantino loved it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's all he needs to know.
That's right. That's all you need to know is what Tarantino likes.
But I would, I'd actually be curious to see the other 6 minutes of footage that was cut, because the 3 minutes they put back in were great. So
that could actually, I mean, if you're watching a slasher for it being a slasher, that could actually raise it up a notch if you've got some really cool practical effects.
And in a world where you have Terrifier 2, I just feel like anything this film did is probably fair game.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think that footage is lost though? Or do you think it does exist somewhere on a reel?
I didn't come across anything in my reading that suggested there was like a special edition or anything with everything put back in. The cut must exist somewhere. Yeah. But whether it's been released or will be released, I mean, I haven't looked to see if there's like a Criterion edition of this that maybe would have all that stuff in it. But yeah, that would be interesting to find out because I would like to see it with everything in with the original cut. Like if there's a director's cut of this film, I'd like to see that.
All right, make it happen.
That's right.
I'd watch that.
Make us proud.
Oh, the other fun just trivia thing I found is that just the hazardous nature of filming in an actual mine, because they're 2,700 feet underground. So there was risk of gas. There's certain lights that they weren't allowed to use because they were worried about hazards. Yeah. And it actually took them about an hour to like transport the cast like down into the mine, like in a safe, proper way.
Holy cow.
So kudos to them for like, they wanted obviously the authenticity of a real mine and not just a set somewhere, but they had to overcome some serious challenges.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't realize that. I didn't come across that.
And those damn polite Canadians cleaning it all up first and ruining
ridiculous.
The aesthetic. So.
Exactly.
All right, well, I think everything else I want to talk about involves spoilers.
Me too.
Is there anything else? So we both recommend My Bloody Valentine. If you've not seen this one from 1981, go check it out.
Exactly. All right.
Spoilers?
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, okay. So which of the kills stands out most to you? Because there's some crazy ones.
Okay. I think there's two that maybe are on equal for me. There's the laundromat, which was awesome. And there's the shower, Sylvia in the showers.
Oh, okay. That was not on my list.
I really like that one.
Where he picks her up. And,
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, did you...
Those were both clearly cut in the original version and put back in. There was like a slightly grainier texture to the censored film.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Did it tweak on you, you know, the random guy in the wiener water? That was like sleepaway camp?
Totally was, yeah. I still found that one to be pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
That's a bad way to go, having your face boiled in hot dog water.
In that scene where the two, I found this to be really interesting too, because there's two women that come in to check on him, and there's a boiling heart in the water. And instead of being, and this was interesting too, I think partly because of the time, because I think organ meat was much more common than it is now. So they weren't freaked out by it or weirded out by it. It's just like, why is that in there?
Did they throw it back in? I
can't remember. I think they did, but it was just like super interesting to me because I was with some friends on the weekend who are older, and they were talking about, hard to believe, I know, but even older than me. But they were talking about, you know, having to eat liver and whatever, heart and all those kinds of things when they were kids. So that feels authentic to me too, because organ meat typically was far cheaper than regular meat. It was kind of like the cast-offs. So if you're in a, you know, fairly challenged economically resource town, you're going to be buying those kinds of cuts of meat. Right?
It's better than prairie oysters in Alberta. So
exactly. Yeah. So which two were yours?
Yeah. So I also had the dryer. Yeah. That was nasty.
That was
but really good. Like that looked legit. And for me, it was the pickaxe through the guy's chin and like his eyeball poking out, and like that looked real good.
Real good.
And I also noted the hot dog water just because it wasn't as impressive in terms of practical effects, but it was still pretty gnarly. So
now the guy with the pickaxe, is that the old guy that's setting up he wants to scare the kids and he's setting up the trap?
Yeah. He keeps coming back to check and really loves himself.
And I thought that was really good too, because the guy, if I remember correctly, he's drunk, but he wants to set these kids up.
Yeah.
And he's amusing himself, so he keeps checking on his trap. Like that. That felt real to me, right?
100%.
And it was like, and then the last time when he gets the pickaxe, I thought that scene was really good.
Yeah, me too.
Really good.
Yeah. So the practical effects all around were good, but yeah, it's interesting. You and I both noted the dryer thing. That was pretty nasty.
Well, and yeah, not just the practicals of how Mabel looked, but I was imagining the smell, because she was in the dryer already. So it was like, oh, what would that smell like in the laundromat?
That's true. It's a bit of a bait and switch too, because her original kill's off screen.
Yes.
So they're like, oh, they didn't show it, but then they make up for it doubly by showing the aftermath.
Totally.
I thought that worked out really well. Some of the kills in the mine at the end were fine. They didn't stand out maybe as much as those ones. Although, so it's Mike and Harriet, and you find them with a drill through both of them.
Yes.
So apparently that is one of the scenes that they cut out that still didn't make it into the film.
Oh, interesting.
So whatever they did there, like him actually drilling through both of them, I guess would have been pretty spectacular.
Yeah. Just like Driller Killer. Or Slumber Party Massacre.
Slumber Party Massacre, yeah, exactly.
So I liked, what was I going to say? Something tweaked on me. In the mine at the beginning. Yep. So the beginning, we're starting 20 years back.
The very beginning?
The very beginning.
Yes.
I thought that was a cool scene too, because this is a typical 80s kind of sleazy, soft porn kind of scene where, the guy in the miner outfit is with you think it's two miners, I think. And then one of them takes the thing off.
Yes.
And it's a woman, of course. I don't remember, was she just in a brassiere, or do you actually see her breasts? I can't remember.
She was wearing like a top.
Yeah. So, but then she's playing with the hose, kind of like, kind of like it's foreplay. And then, she just bites it right there.
And I feel like that set maybe an unrealistic tone, because the rest of the film doesn't have that sleazier feel to it. Like there's couples who kind of go off to hook up, but it feels like
it's pretty restrained.
Definitely. And you feel like there's genuine romance there, and it's more like cute rather than sexual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd forgotten about the original scene, which is the only one that feels that way to me.
Yeah.
A bit exploitative.
Exactly. because, and I think, if you look at other things around this time, I mean, Last House on the Left, which is so far beyond this one, that was 72, I think. So it's only a year later.
Yeah.
But, you start to see some of the remnants of the sexual revolution in the 70s and those kinds of things kind of come into these 80s films where you get, I think there was because a lot of these, and I don't know if this one was actually, I think this did have a theatrical release, but many of these smaller budget ones were straight to video.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. I don't know.
I don't know in this one. I seem to recall it was in the theaters though. Like I seem to remember seeing commercials.
Maybe in Canada would have had a theatrical release.
Maybe.
This would be a good like drive-in movie.
Exactly.
Kind of
it would be. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, notable, there was no nudity, which I find a lot of these films typically have.
Well, look at Slumber Party Massacre. It was just that same year, and it was completely exploitative.
Exactly.
Right?
Like that one had a very different feel.
Yes.
And that's where I think this one felt refreshing for me. So yeah, the other thing I found a lot of people didn't like was the reveal at the end of the killer.
Right.
Now, I don't know, maybe I just was too into this one, or I just was not. I was actually surprised. In my mind, I was expecting it to be the guy from The Legend.
Right.
So some people, I apparently found that very predictable. But I feel like in slashers, whether it's, what's the guy's name? Russ, who was the killer, the drill guy from
the original?
No, from Slumber Party Massacre.
Oh, did he have a name?
He was like Russ something. Like
I don't remember what his name
But we know who Michael Myers is. We know who Freddy is. We know who Jason is. There's no whodunit element.
Yeah.
I mean, Scream has that. I'm sure there's other ones that have that. But I just took it at face value that them setting up the scenes where he had maybe escaped from the asylum, or I just thought it was that guy. So when it was the Axel character, I was like, oh, okay, that's a pleasant surprise. So that actually worked for me, but it sounds like for a lot of people that was a negative. What was your...
It wasn't a negative for me at all because I thought they really played that out well. Like they gave you the sense, so they show you the beginning, they give you the story of Harry Warden. They talk about Harry Warden coming back and killing the people that were responsible for the mining disaster that he was caught in.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of like, it leaves it open that you think, okay, maybe he is alive. Maybe he did come back.
Yeah.
And I really liked... It felt a little bit to me like the Black Christmas idea, the guy escaping. But of course they didn't, that wasn't where it ended.
No.
They just, it was a red herring and then they brought another killer in.
Yeah. Or Sleepaway Camp where there's like a bit of a twist.
Yeah.
And they show the flashback. So in this case, Axel's dad was one of the ones who was originally murdered by Harry Warden.
Yeah.
Yes. For the supervisors not looking after them.
Yeah.
And of course he had been in the mine and had to survive by eating the other miners. So he's there like chomping on a hand. So yeah, the lore was good. But yeah, maybe I'm naive or I just wasn't thinking hard enough, but I was genuinely surprised and it kind of worked for me. But I know some people's biggest negative seems to be that ending.
Yeah, that certainly wasn't a negative for me. I just thought it was a bait and switch, which it happens all the time in movies.
Yeah.
Did you feel that they left it open at the end? Yeah. So
because he runs on, he cuts off his hand pretty prematurely.
yeah, exactly.
But he does. I'd maybe try and pull that out a few more times first. And then he just runs off, and then the credits come down, right?
Yeah.
So that totally seemed to me like they want to set up for. Is there a sequel to this one?
Not that I know of, but I could be mistaken.
Okay, I'll quickly.
I mean, as I've mentioned, I think before, that those aren't my favorite ways to end. Like, I prefer a more conclusive ending. I don't mind cliffhanger endings, but I just and of course I'm speaking at it, 40 years later. It's just so overdone, the setup for a sequel. And it seems like almost every movie now leaves an opening for something to happen. It's like, can't we just do one-offs anymore? Like just do one movie and make it really good and then move on. But
now, to be fair, in 1981, would there be less?
No, it would have been less of a thing then. Yeah, for sure.
So I agree. Doing that today does feel a bit, are you like, seriously?
Yeah. So that I will acknowledge that that's kind of like modernized looking back because it wasn't. The whole franchise thing didn't start really until the 80s. There weren't.
No, for sure.
And so the 80s was when you started to have those part 2, part 3, part 7, whatever.
And I didn't come across like how well this did at the box office, but I'm almost surprised that this didn't turn into a franchise because of like the look of the miner and the setting. And it seemed like it would logically lead to a franchise, but maybe it didn't do well at the box office. And Usually, sometimes have that information, but I didn't come across that for this one.
I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, maybe for a change, the writers and producers were smart enough to go, how far can we milk this one? Like, so do we have somebody else somebody was killed and then they come back and terrorize the town? Like, and I'm not to say that there haven't been other franchises that have done that. It's like, this is the same story as the last film, just in a different setting or whatever. So yeah, if there isn't a sequel, I appreciate that. I certainly haven't seen it if there is one.
No, I'm very curious to go watch the remake just to see, do they have the love triangle and do they have this same ending, or do they do it differently, or is it the original guy? Or
I don't remember enough about it. Like I said, I mean, it was forgettable, so I forgot it. So I don't remember how closely they followed the original.
So maybe a future episode we'll have to do My Bloody Valentine, the remake.
Yeah.
Was that in 3D too, maybe?
That rings a bell, actually. It might have been in 3D.
I think it was. I think that was when it had a bit of resurgence.
Scene,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if I have too much else to say about this one other than I really liked it. It sounds like some of the elements that bother other people didn't bother me in this case, and they kind of worked for me actually in most cases. So maybe we are slightly friendlier to this one than other people have been. But I don't know. I feel like there's been some pretty cheesy, lame 1980s films and slashers, and I feel like this one's pretty solid.
There you go. Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything else to add.
And Tarantino's on our side, so
there you go. So you can't argue with Tarantino.
No, I feel good about that one. So
that's right.
Did you have anything else you want to add to this one?
I do not.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for future 80s goodness. We got a few episodes left to go.
We do.
So it's not over yet.
That's right. We have some good ones coming up.
We do. All right. Thanks for watching, and
we'll see you in the aisles.